Welcome back to Wrong Sports, and when I started the channel, I wanted to talk all about scandals and controversies that happened in college athletics over the years, but after a while I got kind of bummed out. But I've always wanted to go more in depth on a few other scandals that I didn't get into before, and I figured since this next scandal happened in the 1960s, and over these next couple of videos I'm doing stuff about the 1960s, I figured why don't I talk about this one? And this one is really interesting because it's a scandal that hit Illinois football hard, and basketball too, in the mid-1960s. If you don't know about this or really aren't an Illinois fan, then you might be shocked that this almost led to Illinois being expelled from the Big Ten. And it was only after some last-minute decisions that saved Illinois sports forever. But before I get into the scandal, make sure as always you subscribe to the channel below, ring the bell so you can get updates on when my next videos will be dropping. I'm going to be doing another scandal video coming up next, as well as a How the Year Was Won on the final year of the 1960s. And before this video is over, make sure you give this video a like, share this video with other college football fans, and you can check out my podcast. The link is in the description below. You can also help out the channel as well on my Patreon. The link is in the description below. The University of Illinois was and still is one of the most well-regarded Big Ten teams. They had a few national title teams in the 1910s and 1920s under their legendary coach Robert Zupke. The school would gain even more acclaim with a great and legendary player like Red Grange. But when Zupke left in 1941, the school would go out and hire their top assistant at the school, who was also their hockey coach at this point. His name was Ray Elliott. And Elliott was also known as Mr. Illini around campus. That was because he would do anything for the school, hence the fact that he was the hockey coach and also the top assistant for football. And he would lead the football program to some success, like a Rose Bowl win in 1946 and a national title selection in 1951. But throughout most of the 1950s, the team was pretty mediocre, as they only had 2 winning records the last years of the 1950s, and that winning record was a 5-3-1 record. Ray Elliott would coach the team for almost 2 decades before stepping down after the 1959 season. And I'm not sure of the concrete reason, but the athletic director at this point, Doug Mills, was nervous about the team losing fan interest, as ticket sales were declining, and thought that a change was needed at coach. And to replace him was a man with almost the same name, Pete Elliott. Elliott was only 34 at this point, but had quite the pedigree. He was the brother of successful Michigan coach Bump Elliott. Along with that, Pete Elliott had taken the California Bears to the Rose Bowl in 1958. Elliott's first season would see the team be just over 500 as they finished 5-4. But then the bottom fell out in 1961 after the team went winless, going 0-9 and losing most games by 3 touchdowns or more. So really this team couldn't get any worse, and the fan base, which had stuck around for decades, were really starting to dwindle. In a panic, the school's athletic department, with the knowledge of the president of the University of Illinois Systems, Dr. David D. Henry, started a slush fund to help their athletic department. This was the biggest part of this scandal. The slush fund would start in the summer of 1961, and it would quickly gain value. The reason for that was because there were so many alumni living in the area of the campus, and they still wanted to help their school out. The slush fund gained money from these alumni through $100 donations. Along with that, the slush fund was split into 3. One part of the fund was going to the football team, another part of the fund went to the basketball teams, and the third fund would go to the athletic director, Doug Mills. The distribution of the fund money would also be run by the athletic director, as well as the assistant athletic director, Mel Brewer, and the football coach, Pete Elliott. Now, you might be thinking that with the boosters only giving $100, it might not have amounted to all that much of a slush fund, but yeah, actually it did, because like I said, they had a lot of alumni, and probably some of them gave more than $100, or maybe they gave multiple $100 donations. And that is because according to the documents related to the slush fund, the football fund raised $15,354 and spent $14,378. So after seeing all that money, Elliott would clearly get to spending, but he had to be very careful about it. I say that because according to Pete Elliott himself, he said this in a 1999 news story about the slush fund. All I can say about it is, it was against the rules. It was used only for emergency reasons as far as football goes. Nothing was ever used for illegal recruiting or anything like that. And if you are wondering what the emergency was, well, it would actually happen in the first year of the fund. And Elliott even confirmed this, that they spent quite a bit of the slush fund money on a player's wife. According to Elliott, slush fund money was given to player Sam Price as he welcomed a new baby, but his wife was having complications due to the childbirth. She would make it through, but the new parents had a lot of medical expenses. Since Price's wife wasn't covered with insurance or even had insurance through the school, and there weren't student loans, so they would incur the debt and they had to find a way to pay it off. To make sure that the player and his wife wouldn't have any medical debt, Elliott dipped into the slush fund to help pay it off. And the payments on the football team never reached more than $1,000. That was one of the more extreme claims from this slush fund. I say that because the payments on the football team never reached more than $1,000. But about 24 football players from late 1961 through 1966 got some of this slush fund. Along with the football slush fund, there was also a fund for the basketball team. The basketball's fund was created a little bit later in 1964, but it managed to raise $10,520, and it spent about $7,000 of it. Again, this fund was used like the football fund in that it was used for emergency purposes, but it wasn't run by the basketball coach at this time, who was Harry Combs. Combs was a longtime Illinois basketball coach that led the team to several third-place finishes. Along with that, he was an Illinois alumni and also coached Illinois high school basketball, so he was another Mr. Illini. So you heard me talk about how much was in each slush fund, and you heard me talk about how much they spent, and the payments for both teams would start paying off, as the football team would win the Big Ten in 1963 and also win the Rose Bowl too. Then they would win 6 games in 1964 and 1965, before having a losing record in 1966, which I'll get to in a moment. The basketball team, meanwhile, was struggling through most of the 1950s and 1960s, but did win 20 games and go to the Elite Eight in 1963. But that was before the basketball slush fund started, and they didn't really have a downtrend after that, as they went 18-6 in the 1964-65 season, and that was right after the slush fund started, so both teams clearly got a little bit better due to the slush fund. But that is basically all that I have found about the slush fund early days, but since this is a story about something bad happening to the school, let's get into that because it gets a little messy, and it starts to happen right around November 1966. And that was just when the football team was ending their season and the basketball team would be starting their season, as it would start in early December. The first part of all this mess would happen when the athletic director, Doug Mills, was resigning and ultimately retiring after 20 years at the school. He had given a heads up to the coaches and staff before his announcement, and I mention that because rumors were circulating that football coach Pete Elliott was going to get the job as athletic director. This would enrage the assistant athletic director, Mel Brewer. I quickly mentioned Mel Brewer at the beginning and how he knew of the slush fund, and boy did he know about it. He knew so much about it that he took copious notes and receipts of the scheme. And when Brewer found out that he wasn't going to get the athletic director job, he went out in a blaze of glory, as he took all of the notes and receipts and went to the president, David D. Henry, and dropped it all on his desk. Brewer would then quit and never return to the university, and I'm sure after leaving like that, he wasn't welcome back. So now President Henry would have this giant mess thrown on his desk, and he would look really bad if he hit it again. So instead, he went to Big Ten officials and alerted them about the slush fund scheme. The investigation would start quickly, but it would put a dark cloud over the basketball team, which had their season starting on December 2nd. And the basketball team this year would actually play really well, as they beat a top 5 Kentucky team, which they hadn't beaten in forever. But the investigation of this scheme would follow the basketball team throughout the month until December 23rd, when the Illini were getting ready for a game against California at Chicago Stadium. The morning of the game, standouts for the basketball team Rich Jones, Ron Dunlap, and Steve Kuberski were ruled ineligible due to the investigation. Jones and Dunlap would sit on the bench for the game, but the third player, Kuberski, didn't even attend the game and stayed behind in his hometown. According to Kuberski, the reason he didn't sit on the bench or attend the game was because of the anger about him being suspended for less than $1,000. That was what he said he got from the slush fund. And what was worse was that the Big Ten would come out later to say that he would be suspended for the rest of the 1966-67 season, as well as the next season too. The reason for this suspension was due to a seasonal job that Kuberski had over the last 2 years that paid him under $500 for both years total. That was at least what they could find. The NCAA, as well as the Big Ten, questioned how much work he actually did. Kuberski would dispute those claims, but it didn't matter because he would be banned from playing under an Illinois jersey, so he would have to transfer to Bradley to use the rest of his college eligibility. I believe he was allowed to do that since the Big Ten suspended him and not the NCAA, so he had to go to a non-Big Ten school to play after that. Meanwhile, what I have been able to find from Jones and Dunlap were that they were suspended from the team due to getting monthly payments under $50. Yes, you heard that right. One guy was getting $15 a month, and the other guy was getting about $30 a month from the slush fund. But in the end, the investigation found that 12 active football and basketball players had received illegal aid, 7 football players and 5 basketball players. It also found that 17 other athletes had received aid since 1962, and that totaled just about $21,000. And just before the new year of 1967, or shortly after, Illinois would preemptively try to minimize the punishments that they knew that they were going to get, as they agreed with the suspensions of the players, which ruined the rest of their basketball season, since the team started 7-2 and then would finish 12-12 after the investigation broke out. But it would only get worse as the Big Ten would then hand down their decision on March 4th, 1967, and it called for the school to fire football coach Pete Elliott, basketball coach Harry Combs, and assistant basketball coach Howard Braun. And if they didn't, then the school would need to show cause why the university should not suspend or drop Illinois from Big Ten membership. Yes, they were about to kick out Illinois out of the Big Ten. Not many people know that. President Henry would try to show cause by saying that the school alerted the conference of the payments, and they didn't continue the payments after they alerted the Big Ten. On top of that, and this is kind of juicy, but President Henry factually stated that the Big Ten committee was made up of several member schools and coaches that were guilty of infractions as well, just like Illinois. And he would mention big-time coaches like Biggie Munn and Forrest Evashevsky, who were now out of coaching and into the athletic director's spot. But even with all of this, and no matter how factual it is that those guys probably did something illegal while they were coaching, it didn't help Illinois, because the Big Ten gave them an ultimatum, as the conference demanded that the implicated coaches be fired, or the school could face an indefinite suspension. So now, with nothing left to do, President Henry would accept the punishment, and football coach Pete Elliott and the 2 basketball coaches had their existing contracts terminated on August 31st, 1967. Harry Combs and Howard Braun were able to coach the rest of that awkward basketball season, but Pete Elliott was basically persona non grata on the campus after the 1966 football season until his ultimate termination 8 months later. The basketball team would end up hiring a former player again in Harv Schmid, and Schmid didn't have any coaching experience and was left with a depleted lineup mostly made up of walk-ons. But the team didn't look too bad since they took Final Four team Houston to the limit early in that season and would finish with 11-13 record. Schmid would have an 18-win season the next year, but he never got the team to any higher heights and he never got them to the tournament. And actually, Illinois basketball wouldn't end up making it to the NCAA tournament until 1981 when Lou Henson got there. So that shows just how much this scandal hurt that team. The football team would also be hurt as well, as they would have to go out and hire another former player in Jim Valek. Valek did have over a decade of assistant coaching experience at Army and Illinois, and also coached high school football, but taking the Illinois job now was not easy, and was quite a big step for a guy that didn't have any head coaching experience at the college level. When he got there were over a dozen or more players that had left the school after Elliott was terminated, so Valek had to do a lot of work with barren cupboards. He did manage, though, a 4-6 record in 1967, including winning 3 Big Ten games on the road. But Valek wasn't the best recruiter, so the next year the school went 1-9, and then they dropped all the way to the bottom, as they went 0-10 in 1969. He would have a record of 8-32 over his 4 seasons and would leave Illinois in 1970. Illinois would finally get a winning record, but not until 1974, and it was when they went 6-4-1. They wouldn't go to a bowl game until 1982 and would finally win the Big Ten in 1983, showing just how much the slush fund scandal hurt both teams for over a decade. So in the end, a slush fund that was worth upwards of about $25,000 in the 1960s and about $200,000 now almost took down Illinois basketball and football, and also nearly got the entire school kicked out of the Big Ten forever, which originally shocked me when I was researching this video. But tell me what you think, and tell me if there are other scandals you want me to cover, because I will actually be going over another scandal that happened in the 1960s that had to do with another slush fund. That'll be the Colorado slush fund. I'll get to that in just a little bit. As always, make sure you like and share this video below, and of course ring the bell so you get updates on when I will be dropping brand new videos. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do that below, and have a fantastic rest of your day.